According to a recent Charles Schwab study of 401k investors, only 34% of Americans feel very likely to reach their retirement goals. Last year, it was 43%, a nearly 10-point dip in confidence in just 12 months. That's the kind of drop that makes me raise my eyebrows. I can't imagine people randomly forgetting how to save for retirement over the past 365 days. So let's take a look at what's really behind these numbers to get an idea of what's going on and, more importantly, what, if anything, you can actually do about it. It shouldn't be a surprise that inflation ranked at the top of the list. 57% in the Schwab survey said inflation is their biggest obstacle to saving for retirement, followed by keeping up with monthly expenses reported by 38% of people. This checks out since they pretty much go hand in hand. Inflation may have cooled off over the past year, but prices are still rising, and the 14% spike from 2021 and 2022 still stings. You feel it instantly at the grocery store or the gas pump, but what's less obvious and noticeable is what it actually takes to ease that pressure, which is real wage growth. It needs to outpace inflation just enough to make a difference. Unfortunately, wages are one of those things that are pretty sticky. Raises usually come once a year and are tied to things like contracts, yearly promotions, or company budgets, and often lag behind these price spikes that we've seen since 2021. Historically, real wages only catch up after years of worker pressure or tight labor markets. They've nearly recovered from the 2021-2022 hit thanks to solid gains since 2023. But with another 8% inflation since then, a lot are still struggling to cover expenses, let alone save for retirement. And inflation isn't the only thing dragging people down. The survey also showed that credit card debt is another obstacle impacting 26% of people. This stuff is absolutely brutal because those 22% interest rates wipe out any benefit that you would get from investing instead of paying it down. A few years back, I was going over the finances of someone I was doing some one-on-one coaching with. She was carrying a credit card balance with a 25% interest rate. Meanwhile, on the other hand, she was continuing to invest for retirement, naturally thinking she was doing the financially responsible thing. Now, when I showed her that paying off that card was a guaranteed 25% return, her face absolutely lit up like I had just taught her how babies were made. Her mind was blown because no one had ever explained it to her that simply before. And then there's a classic unexpected expense. 32% said this is holding them back from saving for a comfortable retirement. Which, let's be honest, it's just a normal expense that wasn't planned for. Car repairs, broken appliances, and the bill that I just got from my city for repaving the streets in my neighborhood. Yes, I was that guy who called them up to ask why I even pay taxes when they're just going to charge me for something like this. Now, even though the lady that I talked to from the city was named Karen, very suspicious, she was actually very, very nice and kind, and essentially told me that they're charging me because they can. It was a nice little reminder that even if my house is paid off, I don't actually own anything. The city makes the rules, they enforce those rules, and they can charge me whatever the heck they want. My role in this grand scheme is to bend over, write that check, and pretend like I am a proud homeowner instead of a long-term renter with slightly better paint options. Okay, my personal rant is over. What was a little encouraging to see is that even with these headwinds, a lot of these investors aren't letting that impact their retirement savings. 40% said they're reducing the number of purchases they make, and 39% are buying cheaper products, while only 14% said that they're investing less outside of their 401k, 11% are reducing their 401k contributions, and 6% are saving less in their HSA. I mean, in a perfect world, spending doesn't have to change just to stay invested. But as a personal finance nerd, nothing gets me all hot and bothered more than people trimming their expenses instead of retirement savings. Which probably says a lot about my love life. But even with those efforts, confidence is slipping a little bit, and there's a reason for it. Last year, 43% said they felt very likely to reach their retirement goals. This year, it's down to just 34%. That drop says a lot regarding how people are actually feeling about retirement right now, and the generational breakdown makes it even more interesting. Gen Z is the most optimistic, with about half saying that they're likely to hit their goals. Boomers, on the other hand, are the most pessimistic, with confidence dropping the hardest. Which is kind of hilarious when you think about it because boomers are sitting on the biggest pile of wealth in human history. Yet they're acting like they're one bad grocery trip away from living under a freaking bridge. It's like Scrooge McDuck diving into a vault of gold coins and complaining, oh, this water it's just way too cold. Boomers, chill the F out. Not only are you hoarding all of the wealth, but we younger generations are subsidizing your whole existence right now. Oh my gosh, what a bunch of weenie whiner babies. Jarrad, don't make the baby boomer joke right now. You're gonna piss a lot of people off if you do. Gen Z is probably the most screwed rude out of all of us, and they're super optimistic. I guess in your 20s, retirement is so far away that you've got decades ahead of you to make things happen and course correct if you need to. All joking aside, to the baby boomers, to the people in their 60s who don't hold all of this wealth, there is less runway, and it's a lot more clear as to how things are going to play out, so I understand why some of them feel a lot more pessimistic. By that age, changes can still be made to get you closer to your retirement savings goal, but those options are a lot more limited, which is a good reminder to all of us younger generations how important it is to get ahead of this sort of stuff while we're still young and have a higher earning potential. One thing I've noticed with individuals I work with, though, is the massive gap in confidence between someone who has a plan and someone who doesn't. Take two people, Max and Lewis. Both have $250,000 saved in their 401k. Same age, same balance, and same income. On paper, they're in the exact same spot. Max has actually run the numbers. He knows that if he keeps contributing 15% of his salary, gets his employer match, and his investments grow at a reasonable 6 to 7% a year, he'll likely end up with around $1.2 million by age 65. He's also thought through how much he'll need each month in retirement, so he feels more comfortable with what he's aiming for. He knows naturally that expenses are going to change between now and then, but at the very least, he's laid out a rough plan. Lewis, on the other hand, hasn't done any of that. All he sees is $250,000 and thinks there is no way this will ever be enough. In his head, maybe it grows to $800,000 by 65, and that feels nowhere close to the lifestyle he wants to live. He hasn't run the numbers, doesn't understand what compounding can do, and hasn't thought about how his expenses might actually shift in retirement. Same balance as Max, but a completely different mindset. The only difference is that Max has a plan and Lewis does not. So the confidence gap isn't necessarily about the actual dollars, but the actual direction instead. The ones who lack a plan tend to feel like they are failing even when they're not. It's one of the major reasons I personally use Bolden, the DIY retirement planning software, to make sure my numbers are on track. I'll have a link in the description to check them out. Confidence is one thing, but expectations are a whole nother thing, and that's where the survey gets really interesting. The Schwab data shows the average expected retirement age has crept up from 65 to 66, and when asked how long they think their savings will last, the answer was 22 years. Now on the surface, that sounds pretty reasonable. Retire at 66, make it to 88, and call the whole thing a day. But here's the problem. Retirement isn't all nice and neat like that. Between lifespan, health span, market swings, healthcare costs, and Social Security, they all change the math. So let's run the numbers and see how that 22-year expectation stacks up against a common framework like the 4% rule. The rule says you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in the first year of retirement, adjust that amount for inflation each year, and historically, your money has a very high chance of lasting 30 years. For example, let's say you retire with $1 million. Under the 4% rule, you'd withdraw $40,000 in year 1. Year 2, inflation is 2%, so you would bump that up to $40,800. By year 3, after another 2% inflation bump, you're at $41,616, and it keeps going every year from there. That strategy gives you a 30-year runway and takes you from age 66 out to 96, a full 8 years beyond the 22-year horizon people in the Schwab survey are expecting. But here's the catch. The 4% rule isn't perfect. It's a guideline, not a guarantee. Your withdrawal rate will almost certainly change depending on markets, spending needs, or unexpected costs. And it doesn't even factor in Social Security. That's going to kick in for most in their mid-60s and effectively reduces how much you need to draw from your savings. So when someone says, hey, you know what, I think my money is going to last 22 years, that's usually based on a straight line guess, not a full retirement income plan. With Social Security layered in, plus the flexibility to adjust withdrawals over time, the reality often looks better than expected. And in many cases, it actually looks a lot better. If you begin retirement with a nest egg of $500,000 or more, studies suggest you are more likely to see your wealth grow than shrink. A 2016 Journal of Financial Planning study found that many retirees, especially those in higher wealth brackets, spend far less than they safely could. As a result, their financial assets often remain steady or even increase throughout retirement. Social Security covers many of the basics, markets compound over time, and many retirees actually underspend out of caution, all of which contribute to ending retirement with a lot more money than they started. But for those with smaller nest eggs, say under $200,000, closer to the median for many Americans, the story is a lot different. These retirees often spend close to or above their income, leaving less room for asset growth. A 2018 EBRI study found that retirees with under $200,000 in non-housing assets typically retain about 75% of their savings after 18 years. But 16 to 20% deplete their assets down to just a fifth of where they started. Healthcare costs and lack of pensions hit this group especially hard, and singles face higher per-person expenses. For these retirees, there's often very little wiggle room. Cutting withdrawals isn't an option when every dollar is covering essentials. Moral of the story, make sure you don't run out of money, of course. Start saving to build margin into your plan. Aim for a more dynamic withdrawal strategy, and if you're single, then you better get married. Seems like the numbers make sense, and you should probably get married. But don't get divorced 8 times like I have. And gentlemen, take a little bit of time before you propose. And ladies, when he's down on his knees, you don't have to say yes right away. This man is asking you to make a life-changing decision in the moment when he's on his knees. And he wants an answer right away. Don't do it. Maybe take 24 hours. Sleep on it a little bit. But here's the reality. Most don't live the retirement plan like a spreadsheet. They react to the market, they second guess themselves, and they make emotional decisions with money that the math cannot account for. And the Schwab survey backs this up. About 23% of participants said that they've already made changes to their 401k this year because of volatility and economic conditions, and most of those changes meant shifting into more conservative investments. When we dig into the details by generation, Gen Z and Boomers were the most active in changing to a more conservative portfolio. On the surface, trying to dodge volatility after it's already hit sounds safe. But safe is not always smart. Moving money into conservative funds might protect you in the short term, but over decades, it's like hitting the brakes on your retirement growth. Think about it. If you shift from stocks earning an average of, we'll say 7% or more a year, to bonds earning 3%, that's cutting your growth rate by half. And that's not the only behavioral trap. The survey also found that 62% are checking their 401k performance monthly or more often. Now, checking your account isn't bad. I personally do it once per month, but only to track my net worth in a spreadsheet, which is, shameless plug, available in my personal finance bundle. Link is in the description to get it. But here's the problem: if you can't handle it, the more often you look, the more often you feel the pain of short-term losses. Loss aversion studies show that losing $1 feels about twice as painful as gaining $1 feels good. I've listened to this radio show for 16 years, and it is my favorite way to gauge how the average person reacts to the market because none of these people on the show have any clue what they're doing. I always end up driving in my car, yelling at my dashboard whenever they talk about investing, since they always make the worst possible moves. The only time that they ever bring up their 401ks is when the market is down, obviously. Then it's always the same line: oh, I sold out of everything in my 401k because of whatever is going on. If you're constantly logging in to check your account when you hear some bad news, you're continually feeding your brain losses, even if the long-term trend is positive. And let's not forget that if you are invested in something like broad-based index funds, you don't actually lose money unless you panic sell out of them. The emotional roller coaster is what leads people to panic sell or going too conservative at the worst times possible. And then there's decision fatigue. The more often you tinker with your portfolio, the more likely you are to make changes just for the sake of doing something, even if the best move is to do nothing. The funny thing is, the math shows the best strategy is time in the market, diversification, and patience. Exactly what a lot of people struggle to do. But human behavior has a way of turning long-term investing into short-term gambling. That's why simplicity usually beats complexity. A diversified set of index funds, automated contributions, and the discipline to leave it alone will always outperform the constant tweaking, second-guessing, and over-managing. To see a real-life example of how messy portfolios actually backfire, watch this video to your left next. I break down the exact 12-fund portfolio a financial advisor put my buddy into and why it was a total disaster. Hit that like button before you go. I'll see you in the next one, friends. Done.